This episode is brought to you in part by the American Homebrewers Association, hosts of HomebrewCon, the best beer gathering in the known universe. Make your way to Providence, Rhode Island this June 27th for 3 days of homebrew education and unforgettable nighttime events. Learn more and register at homebrewcon.org. That's homebrewcon.org. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Chris Colby of beerandwinejournal.com joins us to talk about stouts and porters. What sets them apart? And what are some tips to brew some tasty ones? Also, Gary Glass from the AHA brings us up to date on some homebrew legislation and looks forward to HomebrewCon. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other basic brewing gear, including our tie-dye silicone pint and our brewing rainbow shirt. And hop on over to our newly designed basicbrewingshop.com for a great package deal on our DVDs. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you do us the favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment, they say that the new listeners will find us that way. And if you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And thanks to everybody who's helping out. If you go to patreon.com/basicbrewing, you can see a long list of stuff that you can access if you sign up as a supporter. I kegged my no-chill room temp fest beer just the other day. It fermented pretty dang quick, about 3 days. I used L13 Global from Imperial, which is a lager yeast with a recommended temperature range from 46 to 56 degrees Fahrenheit or 8 to 13 C. And it actually fermented at around 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 21 C, which is probably why it just raced through that beer. And when I kegged it, it definitely tasted a bit, kind of green and yeasty. But I looked at the description, and Imperial says on their website that Global is powdery and might need long lagering times or filtering. So I'm going to be patient. I tried it again after a few days in the keg, and it's definitely improving. My wife, Susan, sipped some of that sample, and she said, "Ooh, what's that?" Which is what she says when she likes a beer that I've made. When she's not so sure about a beer, she says, what's that? So there's a little subtlety there that you got to read. So things are looking up for the fest beer. I had to fish a big fly out of the brew kettle during the boil, so it may be more of an infested beer. I may or may not tell Steve about that when we taste it. Speaking of our friends and sponsors at Imperial Organic Yeast, there's a yeast strain that they do recommend pushing the upper envelope in fermentation temperature range, and that's A43 Loki. The good news is that Loki is now part of the year-round core strain lineup at Imperial. It's a Voss strain that's comfortable fermenting from 65 degrees Fahrenheit to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, giving you few esters at the low end and lots of fruity esters at the higher end. And through the end of May, look for A05 Voyager. Voyager is originally from England and plays nicely in both malt-forward styles as well as hop-forward styles. Fairly flocculent, they say, good attenuation, and a lovely ester profile that can also be manipulated by temperature. That's what makes Voyager great for warmer weather brewing. I've got some Voyager for myself, and I'd love to brew a nice English session beer with it. Each pouch of Imperial yeast will have the highest pitch rate of any liquid yeast producer, 200 billion cells. My stir plate is dusty because I don't make starters anymore for moderate gravity 5-gallon batches. I just rip the pouch open, pour it in, and a few hours later that airlock is bubbling. And Imperial has excellent service and a very talented and supportive technical team. So gotta love Imperial Organic Yeast. Check them out at your local homebrew shop or at imperialyeast.com. Now let's talk to Gary Glass, director of the American Homebrew Association, who has a homebrew legislation update that, for me, is close to home. Well, Gary Glass, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Great to be with you, James.
Now, we're going to talk about some homebrew legislation, and it's something close to home. There's been some legislation happening in my own home state of Arkansas.
That's right, yeah. We had a homebrew bill passed just this past April, House Bill 1877, which addresses specifically allowing for homebrew to be removed from the home and then brought to events. So that was something that came up a couple of years ago, where alcohol beverage control started notifying homebrew clubs, particularly in the northwestern part of the state, that their homebrew club meetings, which were taking place at breweries, were not legal.
Mm. Yeah, that's something that I thought was okay. I mean, I'd heard about this issue with homebrew being brought into like tap rooms and such as that, but I thought it was a separate issue from just homebrew not being able to be taken out of the house. I thought this was like an ABC issue with the tap rooms and bringing in outside beer into that environment, whether it was homebrew or not. But it went beyond that.
Yeah, and this is one of the things with homebrew law. It tends to be pretty vague, and so it's open to interpretation. And it sounds like in this case, alcohol beverage control was starting to take a more narrow view of the law. And the law, the way it was previously written, did not specifically allow for homebrew to be removed from the home. So this new version pretty closely mirrors the federal law regarding what you can do with homebrew outside of your home.
So do we know for sure if this new legislation solves the problem of homebrew being brought into breweries for club meetings and such?
We think so. We've heard from alcohol beverage control that they believe that's the case, but they're still in the process of taking the law and then rewriting their regulations around that. So it does the law, the way it was written, doesn't specifically say you can bring it onto licensed premises, but we do believe that's the intent, and that alcohol beverage control will go along with that. But, so most likely, but there is still a slight possibility that they will change their mind on how they want to interpret it. And who knows, 10 years from now, that it's really kind of dependent on who the chief regulator is at the time.
Now, it's kind of embarrassing to me as a homebrew journalist that this kind of flew under my radar, and I didn't know about this until y'all put it out there on social media that it had happened. So, how did this come about? Did you guys have a hand in it?
Well, we had first found out about the issues with the clubs that were in the northwest part of the state back in 2017, and we were coordinating with some of those clubs and providing information on how to go about making a legislative change. But really, we found out we at the AHA found out last month in April. When we were contacted by Ken Thompson from the Central Arkansas Fermenters in Little Rock, that he had gotten a bill passed. So we weren't even aware there was a bill in the legislature that was addressing this. And but he had the right connections. His aunt was the sponsor, his State Representative Deborah Ferguson, and he worked with a lawyer that he knew at Alcohol Beverage Control on the language for the bill. So having those kinds of connections makes it much easier to get legislation passed.
Having Aunt Peggy on the legislature kind of helps around here, apparently. Not saying that that's her name, but it's Arkansas politics is still very grassroots, let's say.
Well, I certainly appreciate Representative Deborah Ferguson for sponsoring the bill, and herding it through the legislature. So whatever it takes to get things made right for homebrewers.
Yeah. Cheers to Ain't Debbie. So you guys in the future, you guys can help craft legislation that makes sure all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted and all that kind of thing. You guys are probably good to pass drafted legislation in front of to make sure that because you've had all this experience in drafting legislation or helping to draft legislation, that some of the hurdles that you can encounter with some making sure that all the bases are covered, if I can use as many metaphors as I can.
Yeah, that's right. So since we've worked with homebrewers in so many different states and seen how the different language works, we do know the kinds of things that you want to look for in terms of what should be included in a bill, and it really is going to vary from state to state depending on the existing alcohol code. And we also have, being a part of the Brewers Association, we have strong connections with the state brewers guilds, and those folks usually have pretty good knowledge of the workings of the state legislature, particularly around alcohol issues, and so having those connections can prove instrumental in avoiding pitfalls and then finding the most efficient path forward.
Yet another reason to support the AHA and the Brewers Association. So kudos for that. And I looked at there's a map that came across Twitter or one of the social media recently of all the dry counties across the United States. And there's on Wikipedia, if you search for dry county, map, dry county, United States, Arkansas and Kentucky have this this red blotch of, we've got like the most dry counties in the country. And then there's mixed use, where it's sometimes, it's moist counties, I think someone called them, although a lot of people have a problem with the word moist. but so Arkansas is certainly a state that needs help in alcohol legislation.
Well, I'm not sure what we can do for the dry counties, but we certainly support the notion that there shouldn't be dry counties.
We just need moral support. Well, we got an exciting month coming up. We don't post audio podcasts in the month of June for family vacations, and I've got a kid graduating from college, which is exciting. But one of the main reasons is HomebrewCon, and this year it's going to be up in Providence, Rhode Island.
That's right. Yeah, we'll be in New England for HomebrewCon for the first time in 28 years. So very excited to be in Providence. It's a city I wasn't very familiar with when we started looking at it, and I've definitely fallen in love with it. It's a really great city. It's a small city. But it's only about 40 minutes away from Boston, which is obviously a very large city. Mm-hmm. So it's a great location, easily accessible from, it's just 2 hours away from New York City. And like I said, 40 minutes from Boston. So really great location for us. We're excited to be in New England again.
Yeah, I'm excited. Steve and I have our plane tickets and our hotel reservations, and we're all ready to go and all excited about it. So for those who aren't familiar with HomebrewCon, if they've been hiding under a rock somewhere, in addition to tons and tons of great beers to be had up there, homebrew, it is an educational experience as well.
Right, yeah. We have 68 different educational sessions to choose from across 13 tracks of content. We've got a great lineup of speakers this year. Actually, I really wish I could be in every single one of them. Of course, we're running 6 sessions simultaneously, so that's not possible. But we do record them all. Mm-hmm. But some of the folks we got, Drew Beecham and Denny Kahn are giving a presentation around their new book, Simple Homebrewing. Gordon Strong from the BJ Spees giving a presentation on oxidation. Stan Hieronymus, well-known author, giving a presentation on hops. Michael Fairbrother from Moonlight Meadery, one of the most fantastic meaderies in the country, and they're up in New Hampshire. He's given a presentation. We've got Ron Pattison from the UK giving a talk on Scottish beers. The Smithsonian's beer historian is giving a presentation at HomebrewCon. We've also got 3 different in-depth workshops that are taking place at HomebrewCon. We've got one from Pat Fahey with Cicerone. John Palmer is doing a deep dive on water, and then Michael Tonsmeyer, author of American Wild Ales, is giving a workshop on sour beers. So much to get out of HomebrewCon this year.
Yeah, and it's a little later this year, which usually Steve Wilkes and I usually spend my birthday at HomebrewCon, and Steve, whose wedding anniversary is on my birthday, usually unfortunately spends the time away from his wife. But it's a little later this year, so we get to celebrate our respective holidays, with our families. What are the dates this year?
So it's June 27th through the 29th, so last week in June. So it's a great time to be in that part of the country as well.
Yeah, and if people want to know more about it, they can go to homebrewcon.org. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, homebrewcon.org.
My head is full of URLs nowadays. But and there are different packages. If you want to, there's the full blown thing, and then there's a lesser package for people who want to save a couple of bucks and just go to the social events. Right.
So our full conference is full conference package is $295. Then we do a $240 social package, which doesn't include the educational sessions, but does include the nighttime events like the kickoff party, where we've got over 30 breweries that are going to, mostly local, that you're not going to find anywhere. You're not going to find those beers anywhere else, and they're all right there for you. You don't have to go out and find them. They're there at the conference. And then club night, we have 47 clubs lined up. We'll probably get a few more. So it's one of the biggest club nights we've had in many years. And then our knockout party as well. And then also we have the social package also gets you into the Homebrew Expo. We have over 70 exhibitors this year for with ingredients, equipment. You get the first glimpse of so many new products that are coming out at in that Homebrew Expo. It's pretty awesome. Like there's nothing else like it.
And then there's the what do they call it? They used to call it the hospitality suite, but it's where homebrew clubs take turns in serving beers, usually near the exhibit space.
Right, yeah. So the social club is within that expo space, and we have homebrew clubs that rotate throughout the conference, serving their homebrew. So there's homebrew at this event 3 straight days, everywhere you turn.
So pacing is important.
Pacing is very important. Staying hydrated.
Well, it's going to be a blast, and if you can swing it, the educational sessions are well worth the extra upgrade from just the social package. It's going to be amazing, and if for some reason you can't be there, and the experience is something in itself. If for some reason you can't attend, if you're a member of the Homebrewers Association, the presentations will be online later.
Correct. Yeah. So we'll probably get those up. I would say by end of August, hopefully, depending on what kind of formatting issues we might have with the recordings. But it usually takes a couple of months. But it's great to be able to offer all that amazing content, and we've got recordings going back to the year the 2012 conference.
Wow.
So lots of great content for members on homebrewsassociation.org.
There you go. Well, Gary, I appreciate it, and I will see you in June.
Looking forward to it, James.
Well, thanks to Gary and to Ken Thompson down there in Central Arkansas, and Representative Deborah Ferguson for getting our state up to speed on the homebrew legislation front. Sorry I called you Aunt Debbie. I'm so old that I had aunts when I was a kid. Some have aunts, some have aunts. But my grandmother's sisters were called aunts. It's enough homespun stuff for me. Let's talk about something modern and shiny and efficient. And that's electric brewing gear from our friends and sponsors Desiree and Dave from High Gravity in Tulsa. You've heard me brag about my electric brew in a bag setup with the Warthog controller that I got from High Gravity. Coming up to mash temperature is automatic and painless. Keeping mash rest temps steady is a no-brainer. Even ramping up mash temps for step mashes is easy. No more pouring boiling water into a mash tun and crossing my fingers that I hit the mark. And I can keep a rolling boil even on a cold and windy day. Electric brewing with a Warthog system from High Gravity takes the pain out of propane. And High Gravity now sells Spike brewing equipment to add even more bling to your brew house. Whether you're a brew-in-a-bag brewer like me, or if you prefer 2 or 3 vessel systems, from 5 gallons up to 2 barrels, High Gravity has you covered. And of course, they're a fully stocked homebrew shop with all the ingredients you'd ever need, with recipe kits to fit a diverse range of tastes based on beers brewed at Pippin's Tap Room. They've got it all. Head on over to highgravitybrew.com and use the promo code EBC75BB to save $75 off your electric brewing gear purchase. highgravitybrew.com. Okay, it's been much too long since I've talked to Chris Colby of beerandwinejournal.com. He's coming out of a virus or a cold or something, so he kind of goes in and out of his death metal karaoke voice, but it's it's nothing that a cool porter or stout wouldn't soothe. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
Sure. It's been a while since we chatted. I thought it was like last month, but I looked and it's been a long time. A listener from, I think it was Sweden, wrote a letter talking about some other issue, and he's like, "Oh yeah, where's Chris Colby? I miss hearing his voice on the show." And I was like, well, it's been a while. We need to get together again.
I'm in Bastrop taking drugs. That's what I'm doing.
You're currently recovering from an illness, a moderate illness, a coughing illness. So we may have to pause every now and then for you to hack up something like one of your cats. Not that you would hack up one of your cats. I mean, as if you were one of your cats hacking up something.
We'll have to see how it goes.
Well, we're here to talk about porters versus stouts. Describe what a porter is and what a stout is, and what they have in common, and where do they come from, and do they have common history? What's up with stouts and porters?
Beer history is sort of not maybe my strong suit, but stouts and porter have a common beginning in just dark British beers, and they both share that they've got a roasty, dark grain character to them, and what delineates the two is really just, I don't know. There's not one character you can point to and say this makes it a stout versus this makes it a porter. It's just sort of what they're labeled as, I think.
Well, the BJCP has a bunch of descriptions of different subcategories and such as that. I've always thought that stouts are supposed to be more roasty. Is that inaccurate, or is that close?
Stouts tend to use roasted unmalted barley as their main dark grain, and that gives them a little coffee-like edge, whereas at least some porters tend to use black patent malt, which gives them more of a clean, roasty character. But I'm not sure if that would, in fact, I know that doesn't hold true for all of them. For example, Sierra Nevada Stout used to be, and maybe still is, I don't know, I haven't seen it around, but that used to be 100% black patent. Or 100% black patent that was all the specialty malts.
The style delineation may be in the eye of the beholder.
If you had a beer, and whether it was a stout or a porter, and you handed it to someone, they would, at least, you probably could tell someone this is either a stout or a porter, and they would believe you.
Well, I went through the BJCP style guidelines and looked at the headings of each of the styles, and the style guidelines definitely are tilted more toward the stout side, because the ones that have porter in the name are English porter, Baltic porter, and American porter, and then the other ones are Irish stout, Irish extra stout, sweet stout, oatmeal stout, tropical stout, foreign extra stout, American stout, imperial stout. Those are the official subcategories that mention each of those titles. So it seems like the stout side is a bit overrepresented in all this.
Yeah, there's the three porters are pretty distinct. English porter, Baltic porter, and American porter. Baltic porter is a lager. American porter tends to be very have a lot of sort of American hop presence and a fairly aggressive dark malt profile, whereas English porter tends to be a little smoother, I guess, less aggressive hopping. And then all the other stouts sort of blend into each other to one extent or the other. I mean, obviously, oatmeal stout stands out for its mouthfeel, and then there's everything from what used to be called dry stouts, which are very low in alcohol, about 4%, all the way up to the big imperial stouts, and in the middle there's American stouts in there, usually a different set of ingredients than English or Irish stouts, and then there's foreign export stout and all that.
Yeah, one would think that an American version of each of these styles would be less sort of fruity, estery in the yeast character, more hoppy, probably a bit more crisp than the English styles, maybe?
Yeah, English or, U.S. brewers tend to use, and it's not universal, but tend to use more clean ale yeasts and produce less fruity estery beers, and English styles tend to have a little bit more of that ale yeast expression of the esters and all that. So that would be one way to delineate it. But of course, there are American brewers who do brew in the style of English too. So you can't generalize completely. Right.
And then those that there are those styles out there, or those beers that aren't mentioned in the headings, and those are beers of each style that are have coffee or vanilla or coconut or cherry or mole or adjuncts added, and I guess that would be under a specialty beer category. So let's start off when you're making your favorite porter, let's say. Give us some guidelines on just how to start. What are you thinking of when you're formulating a recipe for the grain bill of just a standard porter?
I've got a porter that I brewed like 30 or 40 times, and I don't start with style guidelines and trying to brew something that someone else has done. I might have a commercial example of a style, and I think I'm going to brew something like that, although not necessarily that. And, in the case of a porter, if when I'm done with the recipe formulation and brewing, and I think that's close enough to a porter to call it a porter, it'd probably be something heavy on the black patent malt. Like it'd be maybe 90 to 85% pale malt. And, if I was thinking sort of an Englishy beer, it'd be pale ale malt, something, around 3 Lovibond or something. And then the remaining bit would be mostly, there'd be 10 to 15%. Probably mostly black patent malt. But I also, when I make dark beers, I like to, there's a lot of different dark grains out there, and I like to blend them. I mean, I'll typically have a dominant one, but then I will put smaller amounts of the various grains in there. Like I'll use, even though it's a porter, I'll use roasted unmalted barley. And there's 2 different roasts to that. Usually there's the 500 Lovibond, like sort of dry stout roast, and there's a 300 Lovibond, like that has a little bit more of a coffee flavor. And then there's also, what's that third one?
I've been playing with brown malt a lot lately on these darker beers. It brings a nice, roasty character into it that's not too sharp or, acrid, but there's just a nice toasty character that the brown malt brings in with it.
Yeah, chocolate malt is what I was thinking of. Chocolate malt has it's like 350 degree Lovibond, and so a lot of the beers I brew, the dark beers, have all 3 of those, and then I just I'll typically have a dominant one depending on what I'm doing. If it's something that I end up labeling a porter, it'll probably be heavy on the black patent. If it's something I end up labeling a stout, it'll probably be heavier on the roasted unmalted barley. And, if it's something that I end up labeling something else, just a dark beer, it might be more heavier on the chocolate malt. And then another thing with dark beers, sometimes I take some of the pale malt and sub in some crystal malt. The sort of crystal caramel character works well with the dark malts, I think, in combination. And I usually, I'll use anywhere between, 5 and 12% if I'm using it. That gives a little bit of that sweetness that goes good with the malts, and it also adds a little bit of body.
Yeah, and the sweetness and the body would probably be more appropriate on the English side as opposed to the American side.
Yeah, in general, it's one of those things that as before, you can't overgeneralize, but yeah, I think American beers sometimes tend to be slightly drier. And they're also usually more carbonated, which goes with the dryness. And it also helps with the impression of body. If you've got a little bit more carbonation in it, you can get away with less of the malts that sort of add body.
And when you're adding these darker specialty malts or specialty grains, in the case of roasted barley, since it's not malted, when you are moving from just a low gravity porter or stout to a higher gravity example, do you scale those specialty grains up proportionally? As you add more base malt to bring your gravity up, do you add the same percentage of the the darkening agents, the dark malts, as you're scaling up a recipe?
I generally don't. I think that the degree of malt or the dark malt roasty flavor is going to be, if you brew a dry stout and you add a pound of, you're making 5 gallons and you add a pound of roasted unmalted barley, and then you go later and brew a foreign export stout, which is a lot stronger. and you add a pound of roasted unmalted barley, the roast character is going to taste pretty close in both of those.
And when you're increasing the gravity of a beer, you are challenged with usually the finishing gravity going up as well. So just without considering your specialty grains, your beer is going to finish sweeter just because you're going to have more unfermentable sugars left over just because you're just starting off with a higher gravity. So if you increase your, say, crystal malt, at the same time you're increasing your base malt, you're going to be increasing even more the unfermentable sugars at the end of the fermentation, right?
Yeah, and you could end up with a beer that's a little bit chewy that way, a little bit overly sweet. And if you wanted to, like as a general rule, on bigger beers, I tend to mash for more fermentability and skew the recipe more towards a fermentable mix. Because it's just a personal preference for mine, but I like beers on the drier side, even bigger beers. So that's something you can do. Or if you like that big chewy feel, you can just go with it and accept it. But I generally mash for higher fermentability, and I make sure to pitch enough yeast so that I get as much attenuation out of them, and choose a yeast strain that gets a high degree of attenuation. Like there's the WLP002, the White Lab strain, and it's the 1968 and Y yeast, which is great for average strength porters, I think, and stouts, but it's a little less attenuative. And when you get into bigger beers, it leaves a lot more body. And again, if that's what you want, that would be a good strain to pursue. But if you don't, like I use the basic American ale yeast for a lot of things. And if I want a good attenuation in a big beer and a fairly clean, presentation overall, I'll go with the quote unquote Chico strain, White Labs 1 and Y East. What is it? 1056.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's Flagship on the Imperial side. To be selfish and plug in the sponsor. So if you want to be more English or more British, you would go to a style or a style of yeast that is probably gives you a bit more fruity esters. And then if you want to be more American, you probably do the American ale yeast and do something with that ferments more cleanly and lets those flavors shine through. But what about, it seems like to me in most of these styles or versions of the style, except for the American version, the hops are not the star of the show. The hops are there mostly just to provide a bit of bitterness to balance the sweetness of the malt, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are styles like black IPA where it's the hops are in a dark beer and they're sort of in the lead, but in most of the stouts and porters, the hop bitterness is just there to sort of support the bitterness from the roast and just make an overall balanced beer. In my porter, I like to use the Northern Brewer hops because one of the characteristics of Northern Brewer hops is it supposedly has a minty character, and I think that's true. I sort of like Northern Brewer hops with dark beers because it just that slight mint character that the Northern Brewer brings works best with the sort of chocolatey character that some darker roasts bring to one degree or another. Like chocolate malt doesn't. It's a little bit misnamed, really, in that it doesn't make a beer taste like chocolate so much, but it's roasted at at a similar temperature profile as chocolate. And in a mix of dark grains, I think you get there are some chocolatey notes that you can get in a porter or stout. And anyway, I think Northern Brewer is a good hop to offset that. And right now, there's a ton of new hops out from like New Zealand, and U.S. is releasing stuff. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for dark beers to look for good pairs of, amongst all the different fruit characters that these hops, evidence. I think there's a lot of room for experimentation right now to come up with a nice, porter or stout, or dark brown ale, any of those that tastes, interesting with a nice, where the hops are more than just, a supporting character.
Mm-hmm. You could think of more of to envision the flavor, more of a chocolate-covered fruit of your choice, whatever the fruit that comes out of those the new hops, whether it's mango or strawberries or whatever descriptors they're using. When you're getting a super roasty beer like a big old stout, do you have to worry about getting too much bitterness in there to kind of accentuate the sort of, I don't know if I want to say acrid, but the less pleasant bitterness that comes out of some hops?
I don't think you really do. I think if your water chemistry is okay, it'll be fine. I mean, I've noticed in dark beers, if you don't have enough carbonates in your water, the overall beer comes out a little bit too acidic, and it has like a drying taste to it, and the dark malts, the expression of them isn't very good. Like you'll smell it, and it just doesn't smell, strongly of dark malt and of like a pleasing character to it. But if you get the right amount of carbonates in your water, use water with enough, of that dissolved, the dark malt character should come out strongly. You should get a nice aroma if especially, I think it's in every beer, it's important to follow cleaning and sanitation, scrupulously. But in dark beers, I think it's especially true because just a little bit of sloppiness and and it can be an aroma killer. And anyway, if you have if you're scrupulously clean and you have the water chemistry right in your stout or porter or even a darker beer relying on chocolate malt, it can be really, it can be fantastic. The smell is wonderful. The hops are great, and of course hop utilization is also dependent on pH, and bringing it up a little bit is going to help. Although, I mean, you don't want to bring it up too far because then it's soapy and you'll get crappy. But having it too low, which can easily happen in a dark beer with a lot of dark grains, is something that should be counteracted with your water chemistry. One thing we should mention.
Sure.
Whenever the topic of dark beers come up, I like to mention how I think black patent malt gets a bad rep among some people, and especially from things that have been published in the homebrewing literature that's not really that accurate. Like, one thing you will read frequently, especially not in professional brewing literature, but in the homebrewing text, is that the black patent malt yields they'll say like an acrid or a burnt flavor to the
ashy.
To a beer.
Ashy.
Yeah, or ashy, and that's factually incorrect. There's a difference between something that is roasted to extremely dark color and something that has combusted, something that's actually burnt. And when they roast black patent malt and some of the other dark malts, they're actually they're on that edge of, the malts are just about ready to combust when they're that hot, but they don't. They control the temperature and make sure that they don't. So, I mean, what black patent brings to a beer is a very intense roastiness, but it's actually not burnt or ashy or whatever. That's just factually wrong. I mean, someone may like or dislike it, and that's fine, but you need to describe it correctly. And an interesting thing about black patent malt is its roasting profile is similar to roasted unmalted barley, but the way that they do it and the way that they vent the gases, black patent malt has a subdued aroma. Like if you took a bunch of black patent malt in your hand and smelled it, there would be a certain intensity of the roasty character. And then if you took a handful, the same amount of roasted unmalted barley and smelled it, the intensity of the roast character in the unmalted roasted barley is going to be a lot more. And it's just differences in malting. So you can use black patent malt when you want to increase the roastiness and the flavor, but not necessarily up the aroma. Or you can use the roasted unmalted barley when you want, both color, or all three: color, flavor, and aroma. Mm-hmm. So a practical upshot of that is that sometimes if you want to adjust the color of a beer, just darken it a little bit, you can add a tiny amount of black patent. In a 5-gallon batch, like 1 or 2 or 3 ounces of black patent isn't going to give enough of a roast character to really be noticed, but you can shift the hue of the beer towards the red, a little bit. And this is, even in light colored beers, if you have a beer that typically turns out straw and you want to turn it like golden, but you don't want to add a bunch of, crystal malts to it, add 2 ounces of, black patent, and it shifts the color a little bit, and you'll never notice the flavor.
That is a tip right there, and I was ready to say goodbye, but you jumped in there with useful info right up to the end.
It's the power of dextromethorphan.
You got the syrup. All right, we'll go lie down.
Guess what I'm doing next?
You clear some cats out of the way and lie down and get to feeling better.
I've got stuff to do. Guess what I'm doing?
What are you doing? Monarch butterflies, I bet.
No, I'm going to be eating some fermented fish. I'm serious.
I know you're serious. That's one reason why I'm laughing.
There's a new magazine coming out from Ogden Publications called Fermentation, and I'm writing 2 stories for the inaugural issue, which is fall 2019. And anyway, one of them is on surströmming, which is a Swedish fermented fish. And so right now I'm going to eat some Swedish fermented fish and take pictures of said aforementioned Swedish fermented fish.
Well, maybe it's good you're a little stopped up.
Yeah, it might help.
All right, so look for fermented on your newsstands or online or wherever that will be. And give us a report. You'll have to give us a report on the fermented fish. All right, Chris. Get to feeling better soon.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel fine. My throat is just weird.
Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye, James.
Thanks again to Chris. I did cut out about 7 minutes of coughing and hacking. And that's just the cats. We'll be... Hope he gets to feeling better soon. We'll be looking forward to that article on fermented fish. In the meantime, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to James at basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. And please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Check out our mobile-friendly shop at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page as well. Special goodies are coming your way. Check all that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. It's all until next time. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.